Quotes from so-called very ancient books are enthusiastically provided in abundance to confirm the validity of the history preached in schools. The fact that all the originals of those often quoted books disappeared under very suspicious circumstances is never even mentioned, and at the same time, when really authentic, very old books surface, in some way or another, they're neglected, avoided, ignored, or they disappear. For example, the famous Sinai tablets found in Romania, hundreds of them, and yet when I try to trace any information of where are they now, are there any translations, text, anything like that, there were only brief mentions here and there that maybe 34 of them are in some sort of archive. The original tablets were made of gold. However, King Carol I in 1875 needed the gold and ordered exact copies to be made out of cheaper material. This is well documented. They were carefully kept in a monastery, but once the current Romanian government managed to take a hold of them, they were immediately declared as not a genuine and locked up, denied any access and even inventory. The reason for categorizing them as non-historic documents was their looks. They did not look old enough to be manufactured in 1875. For example, these items from the treasury of Tutankhamun look to the so-called historians to be older, well over 3,000 years. However, the Dacian tablets do not look old enough for them to be made in 1875. Actually, the Dacian Sinai tablets are a very small tip of the iceberg. What to speak of few tablets? The full cities of the Dacian kings stay absolutely unexplored, buried in the ground. The excuse for not making any excavation is the lack of funds. However, that very same, supposedly poor Romanian government has spared quite few millions to buy back artifacts that were stolen from those unprotected archaeological sites by foreigners who come there and illegally dig up the artifacts. And listen to this full joke. After spending all these millions and buying the artifacts on auctions and other ways, they were carefully collected together and declared as forgery and locked up. And as of today, the villagers who reside nearby the archaeological sites of the cities of the real kings of Dacia, they often see mysterious vehicles, cars with foreign numbers who dig and find things very easily. Apparently, they come already very well informed where to dig to find what they want. Well, no wonder that Romania is yet another country where the local people simply do not believe the official history that they're being taught in school. In very similar situation is the Rohong Codex from Hungary. It is declared absolutely unreadable. All suggested translations are quickly rejected, and I read some amazing stuff about it. Even the so-called historians are trying to convince us that this is so unreadable that maybe it is not even a book. Probably it is just illustration with strange signs besides them. And not only books, such so-called unreadable writings are found on a number of temples all around Europe, and there is no end to the explanations given to them. Like, for example, oh, well, this is not really writing, these were some special signs that the carpenters and stonemasons were using to mark their, materials. It's not really writing.
At this point, those who believe in the Scaliger version of history will probably object and say, no, it is not true that we don't respect the older books. There are some really ancient books that we have in original, and they did not undergo any editing by monks. And these very ancient documents would be the Vindolanda tablets, found in England, and the Oxyrhynchus papyri, found in Egypt.
Let's see of what value, of what use can they be in determining our real history. First of all, the Vindolanda tablets. Fortunately, they are available online in a very neat way. A photo of the tablet and a transcription and translation next to it. There is no text that could be particularly relevant to the history, the way we are examining it, in the collection that is available online. In case there were tablets that were dealing with the history, they are not available to the public. The situation with Oxyrhynchus papyri is different. This is a massive, grand collection of works, and most definitely many of them would contain historic information relevant to the subject that we're researching. Is the timeline taught in school true or not? Oxyrhynchus papyri are not available like the Vindolanda tablets, where you can see each tablet and the text and the translation next to it, which is normal because it's such a big body of literature. But even if it was, it would be of little use because probably they would have dealt with it the standard way. And the standard way is like this: always everything, all the historic figures and events are to be squeezed into the established already during the Reformation fraudulent history and historic timeline. Doesn't matter how well they fit or not, even if it sounds ridiculous, they will twist the translation and purport in such a way that it has to fit. And when it obviously doesn't fit, then they will declare it a mystery.
And with these so-called scanned historical documents that are nothing more than electronic text files, if photos of the original are not made available to the public, how are we to know nothing has been removed or edited?
And here is the latest fresh find along these lines, the scrolls of Herculaneum. Okay, so we have more really authentic old books. So, as we all know very well, the bureaucratic mechanisms that power the official academic establishment, do we have any grounds to consider that these scripts will be impartially studied and the official history timeline will be updated with these new finds? I'm not convinced because they have excluded from history such a large number of finds without giving to the public any explanation. Then what to speak of finds that they can hide so easily by simply hiding the books or giving fraudulent translations? In other words, this argument of those who try to argue to say, you see, we have the mainstream history is based on some very old books. There are such which are officially accepted. This has no meaning because there is no guarantee that the content of these books is available to the public and is indeed included in the official historic timeline. In 2013, entire streets of Roman London were excavated. We hear from the newspapers that some 10,000 artifacts were unearthed. I don't know what is the situation now, but some 1 year after they were taken out, still we had photos of only 5 of them. I wonder why they were not in a hurry to show us what were these 10,000 objects. All of the museums in the world display an average of 15% only of their artifacts, and the rest is not available for public and for researchers. As a routine part of his work, the astronomer Robert Newton takes some old historic data of the movements of the moon, and much to his surprise discovered that the moon behaved very strange and very erratically for a certain period in the past, and then it simply stopped and started behaving again according to the law of physics the way we know them. That was quite a problem, and a special big international conference was summoned in London with the biggest brains in this field. And the conclusion of the conference was that these strange erratical movements were due to some absolutely unknown to us energy that was affecting the moon for a certain period of time only, and then it stopped affecting it, disappeared, and we know absolutely nothing about it.
But the Russian professor of mathematics Anatoly Fomenko decided that maybe this reason for the movements of the moon is not that mysterious.
And he took to the task of looking into the matter.
While checking how did Robert Newton actually place the historic eclipses on the timeline of history, he discovered discrepancies. The record of the eclipses was by itself absolutely correct, but it was inserted at the wrong place of the historic timeline. Why is that so? Because the old chronicles that contained the record of the eclipses, they did not use the current calendar, they had dates of their own. Now, those dates were converted into the current calendar using the Scaliger and Petavius opinion of how history should have been. And that is how they ended in the wrong era. Then Fomenko tried something else. Instead of placing the eclipses in accordance to the unconfirmed hypothesis of Scaliger in the timeline, he calculated a different time of the eclipses based on mathematical analysis of the old chronicles. And when he did that, then everything fell into place. The moon again started abiding the laws of physics, and there was no need to invent any mystical energy explanations for strange behavior because nothing like that happened. Then he thought, wait a minute, but the eclipses were placed hundreds or even thousands of years away from their actual timeline. So what about the other historic events in all these chronicles? Let's see what the history will look like if I place them according to mathematical calculations instead of assumptions based on the faith that the Scaliger timeline is correct. Initially, he could not believe the results himself. But later on, as he devoted many years of his life to studying the old chronicles and placing them where they should be placed, and personally visiting many historic sites, it turned out that no matter how revolutionary and radically the new chronology was different, it still fitted perfectly in the old chronicles and the historic sites. Unlike the history taught in school, which needs to be stretched and it needs silly explanations to make all the artifacts and sites fit in it, and often it uses fraud and destruction of artifacts just to survive. Millions of people in Russia read the books of Fomenko and consider them the genuine history of their country and the world.
Many of the well educated people in Russia respect, and belief Fomenko. Just one example is Garry Kasparov, chess grandmaster, world chess champion, writer, political activist, considered by many to be the greatest chess player of all time.